The Tao of Self-Confidence, episode 408. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. Visit our website at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. Your inner journey to self-confidence awaits. Well, hello, friend. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. I'm your host today, Qian, and today I have a phenomenal lady on the show today. She's the Director of Business Operations at Twitch, and I'm just really excited to have her on today to share her story on self-confidence. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Jenny Chen. Jenny, how are you today? Maybe you can fill in a little bit more about yourself to our listeners.
Sure, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on the show. So my name's Jenny, and I've been at Twitch for roughly 3 years now. It's been a pretty incredible journey thus far, but in addition to being a gamer and nerding out over video games, I also really enjoy yoga, and I think you'll hear a little bit more about that component later on in the podcast.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And Jenny, what's your cultural background?
I'm Chinese, so I was born in China, but I came abroad when I was 5. And for the most part, I was basically raised as a Texan. I lived there for 15 years before moving out to New York and then San Francisco.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And what would be your favorite self-confidence quote?
My favorite self-confidence quote is actually really simple, but I learned this through some of my yoga teacher trainings. And my favorite quote is just, "You are enough." I think it's a great lesson to remember and every day, that you are enough despite all of the struggles that you're going through, to really have compassion for not only others, but also to have compassion for yourself and to just remind yourself of that.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And I think that's a great reminder too, especially growing up as women and as Asian women, we always feel like we have to find a need to seek validation through others, or we feel like we're never enough, but really we're more than enough. And I think if we keep on reminding ourselves that, we're going to start to believe it and start realizing like how powerful we can be, or our potential. So thanks for sharing that. And
yeah, I would just add, it seems like a very simple change, but once you make that change or really start believing it, I would say it changes the entire mindset of how you look at things, how you kind of approach the world, and it allows you to embrace the present tense or what's going on right now and actually enjoy it and stop being overly critical of yourself, which I'm sure a lot of type A personalities do that all the time, or at least I did historically.
Don't worry, you're not the only one. I've been guilty of that as well. So thanks for sharing that. And Jenny, in your own words, how do you define self-confidence?
Yeah, I think self-confidence is a combination of just being comfortable in your own skin and really embracing your own quirks, right? So just to give an example, when I grew up, gaming was probably not considered cool, or even during my first job when I did investment banking, I was kind of more of a closet gamer than actually openly admitting it. And nowadays, once I've really embraced my nerdy gamer chick side, there's a whole slew of opportunities that kind of just opened up right in front of me, right? So not only do I actively play it myself right nowadays, but I literally work in the gaming industry, and I sought out a job at Twitch, and kind of everything else fell in place.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And that was a great definition. And what was your life like before your discovery of self-confidence?
Yeah, I would say I was definitely a lot more timid or soft-spoken, probably more concerned about what others thought of me or whether they would accept my quirks or not, which probably resulted in me not necessarily being true to myself. For example, I pretend to like things or act a certain way because I felt like that was maybe what society deemed. But afterwards, it's much more about, just accepting your own quirkiness and really owning up to it.
Thanks for sharing that. And we're all guilty of that, right? Trying to pretend to like things, just to have others like us. Maybe it could be like a boy you like, or to be part of a group of friends in high school. We've all been guilty of it, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Sometimes we don't know, what's around us until we start to learn to work on ourselves and realize those things don't really matter as much. And what was that point in your life when you realized that, you're more than enough and you can go out there and, be the person that you are today? What was that aha moment?
Yeah, I think there's 2 that I could really speak to. The first one is career-wise, right? So I think one of the things that I've really learned that's key is just speaking up and not being afraid to ask for what you wanted. That includes more openly expressing my thoughts with my manager, but also being more proactive about my own career track. So to put it in as an example, when I first joined Twitch, I joined on the finance team as like part of FP&A. Shortly after we got acquired, and the FP&A role kind of changed as a result, and it became more reporting heavy. So as a result, I wanted something that was a little more, hands-on in the execution, operational aspects, and something a little more strategic. And while I was looking for internal opportunities, I had asked the CFO if I could look at all of the other departments within the company, but there wasn't one that fully fit what I was looking for. And it never occurred to me to just ask him to start a new one, or it also never really occurred to me to just even ask in the first place about like that being a possibility, right? So I think lucky for me is that he took a leap of faith in me and actually suggested, well, what if you stay and report to me, but start your own department, figure out what this department does, define the roles and responsibilities, and we'll work from there. And because of that opportunity, I think it led to a lot more of the confidence that I have today, right? At that point in time, I basically had no thoughts about starting a new department, and I've certainly never managed a department at that point in time, so I never even thought about creating one. But I think just being open is having that dialogue is really important, because I've learned that by asking, or just by for the most part, simply asking, the worst thing that could happen is someone could say no. And nowadays, I encourage all of the people on my team to speak more openly about their careers, their career aspirations, so that we know exactly what they're looking for, right? So in terms of the personal discovery, I think that happened a lot through yoga. So I went through yoga teacher training, and that's been an incredibly rewarding experience. A lot of what I've learned from that is a combination of self-care. And I think self-care and having compassion for yourself naturally lends to more confidence, right? Because you're not necessarily being overly critical of yourself or just beating yourself down if you feel like something didn't happen a certain way. It became much more of a come what may attitude, and really embracing all of the ups and downs in life, because it's all about the journey.
Thanks for sharing that. And I love your story about, you creating a new department. I think people forget, just because there might not be something that's out there, you still have an opportunity to create something new. Having interviewed over 300 women, a lot of them just created their own careers, right? Not even thinking oh, there's nothing out there for me, but really there is, right? It's just seeing things in a different way. What you did is well, why not just create a new department? And if it works, it works. If not, at least, you went out there and took action.
Yeah, and you tried and you did your best at that.
Yeah, totally. It's better than thinking, what if, right? What if I did this, or what, maybe someday I can do it. But, just taking that action, taking that leap of faith, like you mentioned, resulted you, in great things, right? And because of that, what's your life been like now?
I would say creating the team from a professional standpoint has been one of the most rewarding things ever. So it's been really great building a team from scratch, and then also really helping setting the culture for the entire team, right? So one of the things is being more open, right? And I think we strive for teamwork, being open about career aspirations, whether it's inside this team or even at a different team, right? As long as we can retain that talent at Twitch, I think that's the plus. So I think a lot of people are scared to really say what their career aspirations are, because it might not necessarily fall directly in within that team longer term, right? And that's totally okay. So I think a lot of that is setting up the environment for that. But overall, I'd say I'm much more happy and comfortable with who I am. Kind of like what I said before, I believe the first step to self-confidence is really accepting who you are at the core. And for me, a lot of my journey has been through yoga and self-reflection, that's helped tremendously. And then simultaneously, through the career, through the professional aspect, it's a lot of speaking up and just being more vocal as to what I want or what's true to myself, right? So that I can get that both on the personal end, and then also seeing that bridge well with the professional aspects of my life.
Thanks for sharing that. And I love that tip that you mentioned, don't be afraid to speak up. I think, as women especially, we're so afraid to speak our views or our opinions, because we're afraid well, maybe it's not a good idea, or maybe it sounds stupid, or people might laugh at me. But sometimes you never know what happens until you speak up. And the results are usually the opposite of what you think, right? There's someone out there be oh my God, that's a great idea, right? I know sometimes it's scary to speak up, we all go through our fears, but it's just not getting over, but just doing it, even if you're scared, really cures that. And the more you speak up, the more confident you get. So I really love that tip that you mentioned. And, if our listeners wanted to get to know a little bit more about you and what you do, is there any links or social media profiles we can connect with?
Yeah, sure. So LinkedIn's definitely a great way. And then my Twitter handle is Jenny L. Chen.
Thanks for sharing that. And to our listeners, if you want to connect with Jenny, you can also head on over to the taoofselfconfidence.com and search for Jenny's name. Her show notes will pop up along with everything else we talked about. And I just really want to thank Jenny for taking the time today to share her story and tips with us on self-confidence. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. It was great having you on the show. And to our listeners, be on the lookout for another new episode of another amazing woman's journey to self-confidence. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now. Thank you for tuning in to another amazing episode of The Tao of Self-Confidence. Get your free audiobook by visiting our website at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. Your inner journey to self-confidence awaits.